time is it now? Because I need to know whether or not I have to gather people. Hello, hello. Can everyone hear me? The next session is about to start. Please take your seats. Bring your questions, your rage against technology, whatever you want. Bring it here. We can, we can take it now. So please assemble. Take your seats. They will be nice. Of course they'll be nice. We're trying to solve world problems here. Plenty of seats around. Come gather, come gather. Oh, we've got a hush. Do come in if you come in. Okay, so we're running a little bit late, so I wanted to get started. Hello, everyone, in the room and online. Welcome and thank you for coming. This session is about AI, the environment, and ethics, but specifically through the lens of our digital work as environmental communicators. So how do we really understand the real footprint of the tools that we are using? How does AI change the picture? And what questions should we be asking inside our organizations before we hit that deploy button? My name is Jaya Chakrabarti, and today I'll be sharing from the perspective of a digital human rights and environmental justice geeky user of AI and digital. And I use open data to try and influence corporate behaviors. And I've spent the last 11 years watching them react to human rights and environmental due diligence regulations as they've emerged and explored how we can use that data to influence their behaviors. And try and prevent greenwash, try to come back to truth and transparency. I am a big believer that the Hippocratic Oath applies to technologists as much as it does to the medical profession. First, do no harm. So what comes out of this session really matters to me, deeply. So I'm joined by two fantastic speakers that cover the spectrum that I think we'll be able to cover today. Professor Chris Preist is Professor of Sustainability on the end there, and Computer Systems at the University of Bristol. And he's also the university's Academic Director of Sustainability. His work considers the environmental impact of digital services using a whole systems perspective, data centers, networks, devices, and he informs ways in which you can reduce impact at different scales, from behavior and service design through to corporate strategy and national policy. Methodologies his team have developed are used by major digital service providers, including the BBC and Netflix. And today he's going to share his perspective on what factors are shaping environmental impact of AI and what that means for organizational policy on AI use. Martin over here, Martin O'Leary, is the head of studio at the Pervasive Media Studio, based at the brilliant Watershed here in Bristol, where he looks after a community of over 200 artists, technologists, academics, activists, and explores how new technologies can help us think differently about the world and how we make it. His work has a particular focus on early stage prototyping and thinking through making, and the ways in which technology shapes the kinds of futures that we can imagine. And so today he's going to be talking about the tensions that that arise when AI is simultaneously used as an existential threat to the creative industries, as well as a compelling subject for experimental work, and also part of the mundane of everyday business practices as it's sort of seeping into that. So I'll be asking, in terms of format, both Chris and Martin to start us off with about 5 to 8 minutes of their perspectives and experience, and then we'll move on into questions. Now, behind me, you will have noticed that there's a question, and I thought it was a fantastic one that Chris posed. And I wanted to see if it would set the temperature in the room, if you pardon the pun. So I'll read it out just in case you haven't seen it, small text. A data center uses energy to serve a typical AI prompt. If instead we use that energy to boil water for a cup of tea, how many cups of tea could we boil with it? So the options are, much less than a cup of tea, about the same as a cup of tea, 5 cups of tea, or 10 cups of tea. And please note that it could be also coffee. So for this thought experiment, it's worth noting that the query, we've included the AI query's share of the energy used for cooling at the data center, its share of the idle energy from machines that aren't fully used, but we've excluded the use of the energy to train the system in advance and the energy used outside the data center, like the global network, your own device, and that sort of thing. So if you can take a moment, if you haven't already answered that, to try and answer or make a mental note of what your answer would be. Chris should come back to this and tell us the answers as we go. So I will start off, Chris, with you. If you want to.
Yeah, great.
Please
okay.
do.
So first of all, I want to kind of be open about my background, kind of honest about one's background. So I worked for one of the first industrial AI labs in the UK back in the late 80s, and some of you may well work very close to it. I was at Hewlett Packard Research Labs, which is where it no longer exists now, but it was where University of West of England is. It's part of the University of West of England campus. So I want to kind of be open about that. And therefore, I've been working for one of the tech companies. And I joined academia. I was made redundant by Hewlett Packard, and I joined academia about 15 to 20 years ago, somewhere around that. And I've been carrying on the work. So I just want to be open about that. So I'm a computer scientist by background. But I've been passionate since childhood about environmental questions, partly because of the work that people like you did back then, if you see what I mean. And so what I want to do, I'm really interested in what are the big issues with AI and what are the less big issues. I'm interested in environmental questions. I really want to, first of all, recognize that there are serious ethical questions, but I don't want to talk about those, okay? You're happy to ask me later on, but I want to focus on the environment thing. And that's partly because I think people maybe are looking too hard in some places and not hard enough in other places. That's what I'm getting at. And so I put this question up because as you can see, this is quite typical. People really don't know. You see what I mean? People really don't know what the answer to this. Because look, this is, if we're thinking about food, if we're thinking about travel, we don't have that area of uncertainty. Look at the amount of diversity. If I asked you about food or about travel, you probably would be all coming in roughly the same amount. You might be out by 10, but you wouldn't be out by factors of kind of 10,000 between each other. So I'll tell you what the answer is. The answer is actually for a oh god, this is weird. Sorry about that. Do I just leave it?
Leave it.
And not move too much. Okay. The answer is, for most prompts, it's going to be about 1/100th of a cup of water energy worth. For more sophisticated prompts, like if you're making ChatGPT do more work, asking it to give you kind of break down its reasoning, etc., and it gives you a longer prompt, it's going to go up to about 1/10. Okay, so it's very small, but nonetheless, we see AI data centers expanding in the US, in the UK. Google is building one at the moment. There are two actually in the UK, new ones. We see them happening elsewhere, and the reason is because even though AI, when it's used, uses so little energy, and it's also, even if you include training, it doesn't add a lot more to this. Even though it uses so little energy per person, because so many people use it, and this is true of all digital services, Netflix, etc., YouTube, because so many people use it, particularly in Asia, the global south, India, not just in the West, because so many people use it, then it all adds up. That's really the key thing. And I think this is a popular misconception that we think it's big. It's actually a really small part of our carbon footprint. And AI is, or rather digital more generally, is egalitarian in the sense that our environmental responsibility is far more spread around the world than for many other technologies. Flying, for instance, is really the global 1% that flies. You see, if you fly, you're probably part of the global 1%. Whereas AI is already used by about, maybe, let's say, about 1/5 of the world. And the internet more generally is used by about 2/3 of the world. And AI is being adopted around the world very, very quickly, more and more so. And so that's kind of the picture. It's one of those things. It's not about our individual personal use. It's about the fact that it's rolling out everywhere. The other thing that's happening is that companies are experimenting with their own AI, and that's a bit more expensive from an environmental point of view. If you start wanting to build your own personal AI, which some of you might be doing, I don't know, you might be trying to develop if you're using open source models like DeepSeek or Llama, and then building on top of it, then you're doing a lot more training. And even though training is not necessarily that expensive, if a lot of people are doing lots of different training, again, it all adds up. And so we're in a process of kind of explosion of technology around the world, where it's being spread around the world really quickly in an unconstrained way. It's a huge experiment with no control, if you see what I mean. It's being spread around the world so quickly. There's investment in it by companies, individuals. People are experimenting. There's lots of experimentation. We tend to find people in global, if you're asked about what do you think about AI, people in the global south tend to be more optimistic about it than we are, interestingly enough. And so there's lots of experimentation. Somewhere like Nigeria, young people will be experimenting with what they can do with it, trying out new things. How can they appropriate it for what's of interest to them? And so there's this kind of explosion of interest, which is resulting in, even though each person's footprint is small, there's a lot of it around. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say is there is a large amount of investment, speculative investment in AI. And when I look at the figures, when you see how rapidly, for example, AI is improving in efficiency quite quickly, and I look at the figures of investment by the big players, I think a lot of that investment probably will not pay off, if you see what I mean. So there's going to be data centers which are underused in the future. Not definitely, but there's quite likely to be data centers underused. And so in my mind, while we look about the impact of AI, in many ways it's the supply chains which are digging out of Congo, resources out of Congo, building in Asia, and shipping to the West, particularly the US. And we pay too much attention to data centers and not enough attention to the supply chain, where there are definitely environmental harms taking place. Okay? So that's what I'm saying, my first pitch. Thank you.
Fantastic. So also, you've ticked my box there, because my day job is in transparency and supply chain.
Fantastic.
We absolutely need to do that. So I'll bring that back if I'll stop myself raving now.
Yeah.
And also, it seems like we should all drink less tea. If you're going to offset, no, okay. On that note, then I will now bring in. I'll bring in Martin. Martin, you're working with artists and technologists and activists. Can you tell us what you're seeing from your perspective, please?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, folks. So as Jaya said originally, I work at Watershed, which is, if you're not from Bristol, it's just kind of over there, like 2 doors across. And we're an arts and media centre. We have cinemas, we have a gallery space, we have a cafe bar. Recommend the nachos if you're looking for food later. But we also host the space where I work, which is the Pervasive Media Studio, which actually was co-founded with HP Labs back in the day, although they didn't hang around for very long. We're a space, we host, as we said, a community of artists, technologists, people who are doing stuff with art and technology. Often that means that they don't fit neatly into any particular category. So really seeing how this looks from the sort of the coalface of people who are working with this stuff from quite a range of different perspectives. Some of them are, we have illustrators, we have voiceover artists. We also have, people like Chris who've been working in AI since, before it was even called AI. When I first interviewed to work at Watershed, one of the interview questions was, which technology do you think is going to be a big deal in the years to come? And I was like, first thing that popped into my head was, I think this machine learning AI stuff, it's kind of janky right now and might be something soon. That was about 2019. So I feel like I was right, but didn't get the scale of it quite correct. And we really started to see AI sort of largely, when the hype around the metaverse wore off, AI took the next hype cycle, and that was sort of 22-ish, coming out of the peak pandemic years. People were starting to get really excited about things like ChatGPT and so on. And AI, I think, is what technology studies people call a charismatic technology, which means that it seems to provoke ideas in people. When people think about AI not in terms of the material reality of what it actually is, but you talk about AI and suddenly people spin off into a million different ideas about what AI could be. And some of the ideas they have are perfectly reasonable things you could do with AI. Some of the ideas that they have are just bananas, pie in the sky impossibilities. Some of them are totally possible and just wouldn't involve AI at all. But from an artistic perspective, it's a really exciting provocation to think about AI, to think about what does intelligence other than our own mean, to think about what would it mean if we were able to look at ourselves from this external perspective. All of these things, people get very excited. We ended up funding quite a lot of interesting artistic projects that work through that. And then sort of hot on the heels of that wave of excitement came the terrifying existential dread, right? We work with a lot of artists. We work with people whose livelihoods are genuinely being affected by this. If you are an illustrator today, if you are a voiceover artist, if you're someone who composes music, then what you are finding is that a lot of what used to be your bread and butter jobs, making the 30 seconds of music that goes in the background of a podcast, or doing an illustration for the cover of a corporate report. Not the exciting stuff, not the fun, cool stuff, but the stuff that would, pay your rent in a quiet month. That work is drying up. That work is moving to AI. And reasonably so, right? We are all in a massive cost of living crisis. We are in an economic crunch. If you can get that work for free, probably at a much lower quality, but for free, then you are going to do that rather than spend money on a freelancer. And we know the creative industry is full of freelancers. It is not an industry that has job security. And because of that, those are the first people to go when there's any kind of economic crunch, when there's any opportunity to cut costs. You're like, well, maybe we just don't get the freelancer in this time. We'll see if we can do it in-house. We'll see if we can, someone found a cool website. Let's type a prompt into that. It's not good, but it's good enough to go on page 7 of the report. No one's going to look at it anyway. So that came in, and because of that, there's, I don't think it would be a surprise to anyone to hear that the arts are quite negative on AI these days. Most people working in the creative sector are feeling pretty bad about this stuff, and that's for the reason that it's affecting their livelihoods. It's also, probably a cultural clash with the tech industry, which is not doing itself any favors with its rhetoric. It's also, a copyright issue. People feel like their work has been stolen and used to train these things. And people in the arts often coming from quite a politically progressive perspective. The environmental concerns are coming in. The supply chain concerns are coming in. There's so many different issues that are coming in, and people are just feeling really negative about that. That was the second wave. The third wave, which has really come in mostly in the last year, has been that this is starting to slip in to everything. Right? New buttons are popping up in Microsoft Teams that do AI stuff. I'm having Zoom meetings where someone just turns up and they've got their AI note taker alongside them. There's all of these things where someone is just like, well, we can just put it into this website and it'll do some AI. And that is becoming a part of normal, mundane business activity, right? And we're trying to think about how that should work. And this is really difficult because the people who are doing that are still being affected by that charismatic technology idea. People they're using it for mundane business stuff with an imagination that it is going to do magical stuff that it might do in the future. And this is where the real challenge comes in. This stuff is psychologically powerful. It has an effect on people, both as an idea and as a reality. I think I often compare it to when I was 19, I was in the States. I went to Las Vegas for the first time. And I am not a gambling addict. I do not have a problem. But I felt the pull. And I studied maths as an undergrad. I think I had a probability textbook in my bag. I knew exactly how much money I would lose if I played on those machines. I still kind of wanted to do it. Right? And I think it's important to see AI in that same way. It is compelling. We see people who have AI girlfriends now, AI therapists. I know someone who was very nearly recruited into an AI cult. These things are real. These things are definitely having psychological impacts on some people quite severely. And I think we would be foolish to imagine that we are all completely immune to that. Maybe we're not going home to decide how to get married to our AI girlfriend, but we are still feeling something when we play with these things. I know I feel a little like weird compulsion. I'm like, ooh, that was interesting. Let's refresh the thing. Let's refresh the thing. This is exciting. There is a almost gambling-like element to this, which makes it compelling to use. And I think from the perspective of understanding how we should think about these things in that mundane business context, we really need to think, how do we do this in a way where we're not being affected by these psychological compulsions, not being affected by these charismatic dreams of what AI might do tomorrow? How do we think about these things in a way where we're able to focus on the concrete reality of what's going on today? I think I'm going to stop there.
Okay, wow. Okay, so we've covered a hell of a lot of ground already. I have to say, so from my perspective, the going to board meetings and then someone discovering that there was an AI that was sent instead of the person that was supposed to be attending, now that's really where we need to worry about, the delegation to AI, and then how we decide who should be in the room and why. Okay, so I think, given that the previous session had been referring to video, I wanted to open one question before I throw it open to you guys. Can we talk a little bit about video production? It's because we're talking about communication here. I'm going to you first, Chris, because in terms of policy, what should we be thinking about with video production?
So actually, video production is a good example of where AI uses a lot more energy than other things. It's a far more complex computational problem to work out how to move the frame effectively. And the techniques that are used currently are quite inefficient. And so that's an area where you can genuinely say, actually, this uses quite a lot of energy, and it makes sense to avoid it. Possibly also for other reasons as well, as the previous panelist was speaking about. There's good moral reasons for maybe avoiding video in favor of using a freelancer. But certainly, currently, from an environmental point of view, producing video uses a fair amount of energy. Yeah, I don't know the exact figures. In fact, there's not a lot of data, whereas for this, there's quite a lot of data, so we can start answering for chatbots. For video, there's a lot less data, but it looks like it's about kind of maybe 3 kilowatt hours for a 3-minute video, something like that. So it's like kind of heating a room for an hour would be like the equivalent of producing a 3-minute video, something like that, just to give you some sense.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And in terms of what you're seeing from the studio and what's being produced, I mean, are we talking about AI giving more access to people who don't have the skills, and how do you balance that off with people who should be doing the do rather than the AI?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is a lot of people will play around with this stuff. Like, they'll be like, oh yeah, we'll go to a proper filmmaker in the end, but for now, let's put out. Let's type something into AI, we'll get something in 30 seconds, and then we can use that for our, as a stand-in until we get the real thing, or until we decide if we want the real thing. And then, of course, that ends up being the final thing, because that's how business works. So there's definitely that aspect to it. I think there's 2 other aspects to the video production which I think are really important. One is, truth in communication, right? Video is an area where we expect to see the truth, right? We have an idea that it is okay to lie in text, or it is more acceptable to lie in text, whereas faking a video feels like a greater moral crime, and it feels like something that is more convincing to people. If you see something in video, you are more likely to believe that it's real than if someone just wrote it down. And I think getting into a world where we think it is morally acceptable that most video is generated by a machine rather than recorded in the real world, there are some really troubling issues there. The other thing is that, it takes 3 kilowatt hours to render 30 seconds of video. It's really easy to believe you're only going to do that once.
And you're not.
You're not. You're going to see what it comes out with, and you're going to be like, oh, it's almost there. It's not quite right.
Yeah.
I'll just press the button again, and I'll press the button again, and I'll press the button again. And before you know it, you are one of those people in Las Vegas. It's natural human instinct. You see how it's nearly there, and you think, oh yeah, if I do this again, it's going to be right this time. And that is a gambler's way of thinking.
Wow. Okay, right. So, having started the session in that way, I wonder if there are questions that you guys have. So, please feel free. Any questions in the audience?
Can I start with a couple online, Jaya, and then I'll bring the microphone up?
Yes.
I've had one for Chris and one for Martin, so I'll ask them both.
Great.
So, Chris, great to hear about the energy use. Can you say a bit about water and cooling data centers? I get really mixed information about that.
Yeah.
One for Martin, from Sarah. I find it incredibly rude when people bring their AI note takers to meetings and don't ask permission and record me. Any ideas for sparking a conversation or asking people not to?
Yeah, okay, so I'll start about the water. That's a really good question. And I also was a bit bamboozled by that. And so the way that I managed to get an answer was because, as you may know, Bristol University hosts Isambard AI, which is the national AI supercomputer for use by academics out at Emerson's Green. And I got the data for that from our sustainability team. In terms of water projections. And if you look at, I'm not going to remember this quite rightly, but so I might be slightly wrong with these figures, but if you look at the energy use, then it's equivalent to about 13,000 homes is the energy use, but water use is only about 12 homes. So the water use is actually far less. And the reason why there's quite a lot of stories about water use is because old water technology, which is not used for AI, but old data centers used very inefficient water inefficiently to cool, but that's changed. And in fact, you can't use that kind of approach for AI. The way that data centers are built, they actually, you can't use that same technique as they used to use. And so as a result of this, it's very likely that water will not be a big issue. A large AI data center will be comparable. I've heard, for example, a quote, it's roughly the same as a microbrewery or half a golf course. So it's kind of within the, so it can, if you're in an area of water scarcity, that is a real issue. But you don't need to manage just the AI data centers. You need to manage all the potential development and how that might influence water use in those areas. You see what I mean? So that's what I would say. And in fact, if you're interested, if you look me up on LinkedIn, I've done a little history of cooling techniques, which explains that kind of, because originally water was used to, among other things, reduce climate emissions from data centers by reducing the energy it was used. So it was solving one problem or improving one problem by creating another.
Amen. Yeah. And so it goes.
Yeah.
And Martin, in terms of
Note takers, yeah. Etiquette. It is difficult, and as with any new technology, there are questions of etiquette. People have developed patterns of working, and we are all going to have to negotiate this together. We did it when Zoom calls went mainstream. We are going to have to do it with AI note takers. I think what I found useful, because I also do not enjoy it when people bring their AI note taker, is to treat it like, would I be okay with someone demanding a recording of this conversation? Would I be okay with that recording being transmitted to a company that I haven't vetted and processed? And the answer is usually no.
Yeah.
And being able to say, well, actually, it's our organizational policy that if you want to record a meeting, it needs to go to a GDPR vetted supplier, etc. How true that is may vary, but being able to say, look, we have a policy on this. If you want to do this, this is what needs to happen. Everyone needs to have consent in advance. Everyone, the place that it's being stored needs to have a solid data retention policy. It needs to be vetted for GDPR compliance and all of that sort of thing. And usually, when you say that to people, they go, oh, and no. But I think we do also need to practice saying no. I think it's really hard. You start a meeting and someone's like, someone presses some buttons and things happen and you're like, oh, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. And now I'm being recorded saying I'm not being comfortable with that. And that is tricky. I think we are all going to have to learn to put our foot down. And
it's a new landscape.
Yeah.
It's a new landscape. And I think at the moment, certainly boards that I end up chairing, we're having to ask if there are any AIs in a room. Can you please stand up, say hello? Is that you, or is it something else? Right, I saw a question over here at the front.
Around. We've got loads online
Savita.
as well.
Thanks, Savita. Fascinating stuff. And I've written a whole jumble of words here that AI would be really helpful to sort out my question, because I don't quite know what it is, whether it's a question or an observation. Yeah. It feels like AI is happening much faster than our understanding of it, not people who are working in it, but everybody else. And that's quite, I wouldn't say frightening, but it's out there. And I suppose my question is around how can we coexist with AI sort of culturally? Is enough being done to prepare us on the sort of ethical side, etiquette? We just talked about permission of AI being used in everyday situations or work situations. Is enough being done by employers, by government? How do we sort of navigate this? And what could be done right now to help us prepare for this? Because it's here. I use it. 6 months ago, I wasn't using it. I use it pretty much daily now, just for my routine work kind of things and writing up meetings and so on. So, but I don't feel very prepared for it. I don't feel very confident or of the future of it.
Yeah. So who wants to take that first?
I can go.
You go.
Yeah.
Go.
So I think part of this is that charismatic idea. Part of that is because I feel that too, and I think some of it is that we're reacting to the possibilities of AI. So AI has moved reasonably quickly. I don't think it has moved as quickly as when Sam Altman stands up on stage and says it's going to take over the world in the next 5 years. I don't think it's moved as quickly as that. I think there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of, but what will it be able to do next year? And I think what really helps me, at least, is to focus on what can and does it actually do now? And thinking, is that actually that much different to what we were doing before? So is the AI note-taker that much different to recording a Zoom call? In some ways, yes. In a lot of ways, no. Is using ChatGPT to answer a question that much different to using Google? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. But thinking in terms of what is actually different here. And often it's quite small compared to what was going on before. It might be that it's now more convenient, it's now cheaper, it's now more effective at some of these jobs than it was before, but it's not necessarily entirely qualitatively different, and it's something that we can think about in the same terms.
Thank you.
So I'm going to disagree slightly.
Aha!
That's good. The first thing,
Vicious conflict.
It was really interesting. You said, about our understanding, not those people who are developing it. I would say the people who are developing it also don't know. And for a second, and you were speaking about the hype. The hype they are telling is to themselves as well. I think that's a really important thing to be aware of. And one of the reasons is they are risk takers. These people are risk takers. And they are taking a risk because they believe it will pay off for them personally, their companies, but they are taking a risk with the whole of the planet. Yeah, I think that's more of a social statement than an environmental statement. You see, I'm less worried about the environmental implications of AI than the social implications of AI. So I think that's the first thing I would say. And I don't know how many of you have played with ChatGPT, but I actually asked it to prepare an environmental assessment of a data center just from scratch. I thought, including NVIDIA technology, and I told it what technology it was. And it did in 2 minutes what would have taken me 3 months. I had to go back and I had to use my expertise to make sure I understood it and check down those sources. So I couldn't necessarily rely on it, but it certainly improved the speed of what I was doing very, very quickly. And so it is a transformative technology. I think that's the thing. And I must admit, I am the most confused I have been in my whole life. With the political strands that we were talking about in earlier panels and in Alex's panel, that sort of thing. And then this technology on top. The honest answer is that I am very confused. And I just must live with that confusion. And my personal approach is to experiment with AI to try to understand it and try to build a mental picture and to watch what happens. I think that the other thing is, with regard to, from an environmental point of view, one of the drivers in investment in those large data centers is the fact they don't know how it's going to be used yet. And the other is, and they believe that they will be able to do something with this stuff. And I'm not sure they will. They might not. They might. And the other is that they believe in what's called the scaling hypothesis. I don't know how many of you have heard about this, but the scaling hypothesis, and this is really what drives. It's a kind of abstract AI academic concept which drives billions and billions of investment. And the scaling hypothesis is that to make better AI, you don't need to think intelligently about how to program it more. You just simply need to build more complex networks of more complex neural networks with more data, effectively. And so they believe in this hypothesis, and they believe that simply by building larger data centers which can deal with larger models and can learn across those larger models, then that will result in better AI, including AI which goes beyond what we can do. And so that's the story they tell themselves, and that's what they are investing in.
It's terrifying.
Yeah,
Absolutely
exactly.
Terrifying.
And they effectively they believe that if they get this, they will have money, but beyond that, they will have power. So that's the thing. And so that's for me is what's most worrying. Yeah. I'm less worried about the environment. I'm more worried about the political implications of AI.
Okay, so there's a question over here.
Yeah, you've sort of touched on some of what I'm about to talk about. My understanding of AI, I can see the value of it in things like medicine and maybe engineering and solving these complex problems. But I'm really failing to understand the value of employing it in the creative industries, because as far as I can see, all it's actually doing is taking all the fun bits away from humans. We like doing this stuff. We are naturally creative, curious, complex beings, and if we take those things away, what are we left with? So I'm partly wondering, I keep coming back to this term that's being bandied around about enshittification, the enshittification of everything. And is that the way we're heading? And I'm just wondering what the end game of AI might be if we just take away all the creative fun bits away from humans and give it to an algorithm or...
Right, so who wants to take that one?
I can start. Yeah, I'd agree. What I would say is that, yes, it would be great if we were all making art for fun and personal enjoyment. Some people are making art for a living. Some people are making art because they have been paid. I'm not talking
about it as a hobby. I'm talking about it as a career.
Absolutely, but some people are having to make hard choices about financial things. It's great. The solution to this: fund the arts. Brilliant. Yes, which is what I say for everything. But we are in a massive economic crunch when it comes to these things. The creative industries do not have the money that they used to, and in large cases, they are being driven as profit-making businesses. Right? If you are in control of your entire workflow, then yes, of course, you want to use humans. You want to use work with people and have ideas and do everything. If what you need to do is deliver, 3 minutes of polished video by Wednesday, we're going to look at the way of doing things quickly and cheaply. And those kind of compromises are part of the tension that has always existed in the creative industry. Right? There have always been ways of doing things that are a bit crap, but they're cheap and they're fast and they will get the job done and they will please the client and you can move on. So in some degrees, this is just the same thing happening, but at a slightly larger scale. But I think what we need to do as a society, as people who believe this, is to just express that we are not happy seeing AI-generated creative outputs. We put out a poster at Watershed. Sorry, Gavin, who is on the poster, is in the room today. We put out a poster advertising our nomination for Independent Cinema of the Year at Watershed. And it was not AI-generated. It was generated by Tony Stiles, who is an actual human graphic designer. I have met Tony Stiles. He is real. But some people believed that it looked kind of AI generated, and we got a lot of feedback, which was quite negative about that. And I think, we weren't happy about it, but that is healthy. If as an audience we don't want to see this happening, we need to say something when we do see it happening, which does mean that we also need to demand transparency, because more and more we're not able to see where it's happening.
Transparency is key.
Yeah.
You have a thought?
Yes. Some of you might have already seen this meme. There's a lovely meme going around saying, I was expecting technology to clean the house and wash the dishes while I made art and wrote literature, and look what happened, which I think
exactly the point.
So I kind of completely get where that's coming from. And I will just reiterate that I don't have a clue. I'm going to share some thoughts and just reiterate I don't have a clue. I honestly want to be clear that I don't have a clue, but now I want to share some thoughts. So I think there have been technologies which have rolled out and have changed the landscape, and what happens often is that you still get a kind of mass production, and then you get kind of more boutique valuable stuff when there is that kind of mass thing rolling out. And we don't yet know how AI is going to change the landscape. I think that's the first thing to say. The other thing is, is that their AI, and there's a former colleague of mine from Hewlett-Packard Labs, a kind of idea that he uses, and I don't know if it's his or not. It might be a more general idea. If anyone's heard this before, I'd be interested to know, because I don't know where it comes from. But it's the idea of what's called how a technology goes through what's called a parasitic phase. And the parasitic phase is that it sits on top of work that has been done before and kind of sucks value out of that work. Yeah. But it can only do that so long, because it will destroy its host over time. And in the case of AI art, AI literature, in the end, it will become stale because there is no fresh content being handed to it, you see. And so I think some of this might already be happening. It's certainly happening with the more technical side of things. You will get AI companies employing artists to make original art, which they can then train their AIs on. Yeah. Whether that's a job you want, I don't know, but I just say that this kind of thing is what's going to happen. I know I've got a friend whose son is a mathematician, and he is basically marking the AI's maths homework for it, and that's effectively training the AI to be better at mathematics. So there will be work of this kind.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I need to ask how much time we've got so we can get some of the critical questions in at the same time.
We have got pretty much no time, but lunch hasn't appeared.
Okay.
We've had so much coming in online. I wonder if I could just kind of pose them to the room, maybe to get us thinking over lunch, rather than come back. So if we just really quick, some really interesting things. How is AI going to affect environmental misinformation and increase feelings of separation of humans from nature? Someone else who said, things aren't going well, are they? I feel like what we need is to slow down, think more, and use our own authentic voices more on different topics. Another person saying, are jobs AI-proof? Is our jobs AI-proof? And lots of questions about bias and AI models. So just pop those down.
That's great. So given that we're out of time and you've got lunch to deal with, and I want you to go back with some questions to your organisations, can I ask briefly to both of you one thing that people should be taking back into their organisations when it comes down to AI and policy? Because we haven't managed to cover as much as we can on policy.
Yeah. Very briefly, I would say, so this is purely, well, this is not only from an environmental point of view, this is more broadly. I would say, if you are going to use AI, I would say don't think about, kind of the details of the environmental footprint, but look at the company that you are supporting. So which of the companies that are offering these things, which do you consider the least evil, to use, whatever. So, and so I would say look at that. It's that's what I would focus on, rather than the nitty-gritty of, try to use less AI. I don't think trying to use less AI necessarily. Use it intelligently, but trying to use less AI doesn't make much difference. That's not a very good policy. But the policy should be, let's look at these companies, let's choose the least bad, and let's also, to the extent we can, lobby for improvement.
Vote with your money, vote with your feet,
Mm.
absolutely. How about you, Martin?
I think what I would say is these things aren't magic. These things aren't sci-fi creations. They're websites you type words into, right? They are run by human beings. They are run by Silicon Valley companies, they are normal parts of technology. You probably already have policies for dealing with this. You probably have data retention policies. You probably have environmental impact policies. You probably have policies about how you're going to vet your supply chain. Apply those. Look at where they fall short in this new instance, but really, you probably don't need to be thinking about this as a new, exciting, weird thing. You probably need to be thinking about, how does this fit into the world that I already know how to work with? How does my accounting department think about this? How does my legal department think about this? All of those things should be relatively straightforward, and you can identify the points where they can't, and that's where you need to focus your effort.
Fabulous. So and I would definitely say in terms of transparency, that would be one that I would take back from my perspective, corporate transparency on how you're using this stuff so that people can make that decision about your organization as much as you'd want to be able to vet the ones that you're buying from. So in the words of Uncle Ben of Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And we have to make good use of that and ask the questions that we need to know exactly where our money is going with these sorts of technologies. I'd like to thank our panel. Chris, Martin, thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Thank you.
Please give a round of applause. Thank you for those online and your beautiful questions. Give up tea. No more tea. Thank you.